Assistant General Manager for Research Development, Daniel Mack, for all the time put into the project, but also this day. I think you're going to be impressed by the thought that was put into this and the care and the decisions that were made. They'll go through that, but I think that's going to really ring true for everybody here. These shots, we'll have plenty of time afterward if you guys want to get closer. Maybe you already did this. We can also email these images to you. And then afterward, if anybody wants to, we can walk around the stadium. We'll be in the Stadium Bowl, and they've got it marked off where the new wall will be if you want closer to it. And the last thing I wanted to mention, Cole Maxey, our President of Business Operations, as you guys know, in the press release we mentioned there's some new seating elements. A little bit left field, a little bit right field. If you have any questions about that, happy to answer. So, JJ, do you both want to say something off the top, and then I'll take a question.
All right, thanks, Sam. I think first thing to say is this is a pretty exciting day for us. There was a lot of time, energy, effort that was put into the research that led us to this conclusion that this was what was best for our ballpark and our team. Daniel will talk about what his role was and others in his department, but this goes back many, many years. Just watching a lot of games at this ballpark. And very often feeling like we're on the short end because we play more games here than anybody else. We play 81 home games, and we're on the short end of some offense simply because it's a tough ballpark to hit the ball out. So I think a couple things worth mentioning. Number one, we know that there is a finite amount of time that we have left in Kauffman Stadium. And we also know what our roster looks like over the next couple years. So from a competitive nature, we felt like this was a good time and a unique time for us to look into how we could secure wins, put our team in a good position to win ball games, knowing our roster, knowing how long we'll be in this ballpark. And in the end, we weren't too surprised overall with what the research told us. I think it's really important that we emphasize here that we just want a fair ballpark. We're not looking for something that it becomes really offensive and every ball that goes up in the air becomes a home run. We want it to be very fair. So when our players are playing at home, when they're playing on the road, it's the same approach. It doesn't change anything from roster management, the way we want to play the game. It's simply when a ball's hit well, you'll be rewarded. So with that said, I think we did a really good job, very thorough job. And coming to this conclusion, and ultimately we're really happy with what the renderings look like. Very symmetrical ballpark that was important to us, and in the end I think our fans will enjoy it, and quite honestly, aesthetically, probably not see much of a difference. So with that said, I'll turn it over to D-Mac.
Thanks, JJ. This is one of those projects that I think every R&D department in baseball would be extremely excited to take part in, based off of the conversations that we've had for many years. Being able to take a lot of this data, I know that our senior analyst, Alan Kohler, who put in a ton of time and effort into this, was super excited to see if we could find a way to make Kauffman play more fairly. It was one where we got a chance to bring in a lot of different data streams. Obviously, we know the park's dimensions, right? It's a top 5 ballpark by outfield square footage, but there were the other things that we got to bring in to account as well. Right. We have access to more meteorological data than we've had in the past, which has given us an understanding of how wind patterns play at the K. It's one of those ballparks where the wind, on average, hurts us. It's as if our park plays with the walls about 5 feet further back on average. And as everyone who knows a Midwest weather pattern looks like, we have really cold and really hot days, which in some form plays with the fly ball production on our ballpark quite a bit. So we were able to do that, bring all of that data together, and start trying to come up with an interesting optimization problem, something about where we could find the right balance, something where our fly ball production in this ballpark would be roughly equivalent to what happens when we go on the road on the aggregate. We think that that's a better way for our hitters. They don't have to worry about playing in one type of offensive space 81 times and then play across the entire spectrum the rest of the time when they go on the road. It's something that should give them a sense of consistency and fairness. But we also know that comes at a cost, right? It comes at the cost of our pitching staff. So we wanted to find a way for that to be balanced and provide the right boost for our offense without costing our pitchers on their fly balls. And I think we were able to find a really great initial proposal that we were able to present to JJ and Scott Sharp. And, we took a lot of critical feedback from that process across with Mr. Sherman, with our major league coaches, and that kind of brought us to a spot where we are today, which even though these walls have come in, it's still going to be a top 10 by square footage ballpark. As a matter of fact, because center field's not changing at all, that plays a pretty massive part. And I think it's worth touching on that in center field, one of the reasons why we don't make that change, or why we didn't suggest a change on that front, is that basically baseballs are hit more consistently and harder in our center field space than in a lot of ballparks in Major League Baseball. And given that, we kind of need that real estate in order for it to continue to play fairly. So we were able to bring a bunch of those things together and keep iterating to find something that gave us the symmetry without weird angles, and effectively try and bring our ballpark's fly ball production into a roughly middle of the road way.
Cool. Quick questions, Jay. Sorry, you first.
Hey Daniel, when did you start compiling just the data to go ahead and make these changes with the stadium and the outfield? And then did you look at any other ballparks around the league to contrast and compare as well?
100%. So this data we've had in various forms. Obviously, our tracking data goes back a little more than 15 years at this point, depending on how much you're willing to accept the quality of the data. The great news is this meteorological data we've gotten over the last 3 or 4 years, weather applied metrics, have put some cool weather stations in our ballpark that give us access to the things like the weather patterns. We've been using that for a variety of projection models for the last several years. We've gotten a lot of interesting value from that, but it was an opportunity for us to kind of dive even deeper for a very specific problem. Instead of being player-centric, it was park-centric, with the players being, sort of the actors on that front. And we then sort of tried to understand what consistency looked like across all of Major League Baseball, so we could see how other parks play. But one of the things that happens for us is those wind patterns in particular are different enough compared to other parks, primarily because of some of the open spaces with the crown vision in the middle.
And JJ, how do you envision this impacting some of your sluggers just next season and beyond?
Well, I think it's going to impact our hitters in a very positive way. More than anything, we're going to keep emphasizing that we want our guys to maintain certain approaches that fit their style of hitting, that will work here and work on the road. We have seen we can give you several examples of players that try to change, especially when you first get here, but we want that consistency. But clearly, when we look at the projections, our offense comes out far ahead of maybe the negativity or the negative impact it could have on our pitchers, and that was a big part of this research as well. So in the end, our hitters they're gonna benefit from it.
Is there a concern that some guys might look to try to hit more home runs with the fences in?
Our hope is it's the opposite, actually, because now they don't have to put in that extra effort, whatever you want to call it, to try to get out of the ballpark. Just take a normal swing, hit it well, you're going to get rewarded. It may not even be a homer, maybe a double, because there are going to be more doubles now, too, because balls that are run down in the track, where outfielders have space, they're no longer going to have that space. They're going to hit off the top of the wall. So maybe more doubles, maybe more homers, but either way, it's going to benefit a hitter. All right, and let me emphasize our hitters. Again, looking at our roster, really trying to emphasize, what does our roster look like compared to our pitchers on our roster and the type of pitchers that we have.
I don't know, maybe Daniel, you're the one to answer this, but is this kind of a trial run for what a new stadium capacity might be best for you guys?
Well, I think we learned a lot of lessons and got to understand a little bit more about how this data can be applied for batted ball. Obviously, I think the wind patterns might be somewhat specific also to this complex. So it would be an interesting way to extend that to understand, given a different part of Kansas City, how that may or may not be put in play and what kind of, signage, for example. It could lead to some really interesting discussions down the line.
Then, JJ, I mean, you guys for a long time previously used to build a team specifically for the dimensions of this ballpark. I mean, does this make you guys rethink about just how you build your team, or maybe it's just how your team already is and vice versa?
I think it actually helps us with roster construction because we don't have to be as specific, wanting that extra, player that could also defend in left field or right field. I mean, we've said this for years. I mean, 3 players who can play center field sometimes are needed here. We no longer have to worry about that. So when we're trying to add a bat or, a certain player, we can be a little bit more aggressive. And there's a little bit more forgiveness based on the park factors now. But we're also not changing our style of play. As Daniel said, it's still going to be one of the bigger ballparks in the game. We're going to pitch, we're going to play defense, we're going to run the bases, we're going to situational hit. We're going to emphasize the exciting part of the games, the fearlessness, the aggressiveness. So none of that's going to change. Our identity is not going to change at all. Our hope is that we will see a more positive outcome in our results based on a minor change in the ballpark.
I know that, like when fans have these surveys, I mean, some of them will say the triple's the most exciting play of the game. I'm sure that was part of your guys' calculus, knowing that Bobby has led the league in triples before. I just wanted to how that played into the conversation.
It played into it, but we still believe there's going to be triples, mostly because of center field. There's still going to be a lot of space in center field for triples. Now, some of those balls that run into the gaps in right center field and left center field, that more so right center, that turn in triples, maybe they don't. But that's something we'll know at the end of the year. How much did it really impact the triple? But based on, just the name Bobby, Michael, they're still speed players, and they're still going to get their fair share of triples.
So, like, with all the data you guys have with the cameras and all the stuff, how many more home runs would have been hit in this ballpark last year if the fences were like this? But all teams, I mean, like all the games, I guess.
All combined, if I'm trying to average it out, it's probably closer to maybe an extra home run per series. I think it may have, over the course of the last couple years with our roster, could have contributed to roughly 30 home runs, give or take.
And so, JJ, well, you guys were talking about it when you talked to, did you ask the players about this? What were those conversations like? I haven't talked to anyone, but Vinny's had a couple tweets out there, said it was already a hitter-friendly ballpark, a little dubious with it.
Yeah, well, he's in favor. We've had the conversation with him. So, this isn't just this current roster. I mean, I received a couple texts today from former players saying, I wish we had done this, when I was playing. So this is an ongoing thing. Again, the hitters are going to have a better chance to be rewarded when they hit a ball well without the ball being caught. We have talked to the hitters. There was discussions through August and September, just trying to feel it out a little bit. There was more discussion with pitchers here more recently when we realized that we were going to be doing and taking on this project. We had a conference call yesterday with the whole team and basically said, look, half of you are going to be really happy with the first words out of our mouths, half of you are not going to be, but hear us out. Let us walk you through this research and why we came to this conclusion. And I think every one of our players know that we wouldn't do anything that would hurt our team. So when you really just break it down to the most simple way to explain it, we believe this benefits our team. And in the end, we had a very supportive group. However many, every 40-man player was on that call. They were very supportive and excited about it.
What's this cost? I mean,
roughly, I don't have the exact number, but let me just say this: it's less than what you might have thought. So it's less than $5 million, and I'm sure as we get closer to the end of the project, we'll get it more specific. But it's less than $5,000.
LED boards are just moving in.
LED boards are moving in. There will be new fencing from left center to right center, but the LED boards are just being moved in and slightly towards the wings, so we don't lose any of the LED boards. And I know Cullen has the specifics on that, but ultimately I want to say it was 130 feet of LED board. Does that sound about right? I think it was 130 feet, and we're retaining the 130 feet of LED. They're just going to come in and spread out a little bit differently.
Right, and added a few seats too, right?
Seats in left center, seats in right center. There's more seats in left center, 150-ish. around 150-ish, and I think it's closer to 85 to 90 in the porch there in right field.
Mick?
Along those lines, it seems like a heavy lift, but it's something you guys are confident that you'll be able to get done in about 2.5 months here?
Well, that was where we started, like, let's get this thing going as we were breaking for Christmas, because we knew we had to get the project going. And if you get a chance, go out there today, you'll see that the project has already started. But we are on the schedule right now is to finish at least 10 days before spring opening day. We do open up in Atlanta, so we have a couple extra days in case we have some weather, but we don't expect any problems on that end.
Free agency wise, is this something that could help in recruiting players? I don't know if sluggers have been reticent to get here. Is this enough to?
Yeah, I think it will help. And I don't want to be arrogant about this. In the end, players typically go where the best financial deal is offered. Now, can we talk about how we've moved the ballpark in and we expect it to play better? Sure, we can talk about that. Once we have some hard data, some history, now it'll be real. I think our messaging with free agents would just simply be, hey, look, this is a more rewarding ballpark now than it once was, but you still have to be able to hit a ball hard at a certain angle to get it out of here. It's not just going to be a pop-up and it goes.
One for the doctor as well. This doesn't seem like too drastic of a change. Was there a temptation there to do more, to bring in center field, do something with the foul poles along those lines?
I think that's what made the project kind of exciting was we sort of, when you do an optimization problem, you kind of know the point at which you cross and you're like, they're starting to get diminishing returns, things are going in the wrong direction. And one of the, most fun parts of the conversations back and forth with Alan on this particularly was center field, because we were trying to understand sort of those dynamics, but the optimization itself, we kind of figured out there was an 8 to 10 foot tolerance where things work pretty well in the favor of what we were looking for, which is that fairness, and then anything past that was either not moving the needle enough or was starting to become too offensive.
How does it, for center field specifically on the defensive side, is there any less ground to cover? Is it still, or you have to have a Gold Glover out there like you have for a very long time?
Well, I can answer it. I'll let Daniel answer as well, but it's the same. So you still have to have somebody like Izzy out there that can cover the ground. There might be a little bit cut off, but not enough that it's going to affect the offense and what we defined as center field.
Yeah, I think would say is that we still have, it may be just in a little bit of the power alleys where it's gotten cut off, but in general, center field's still center field, and I think it's actually still probably a pretty great homage to what Kauffman Stadium is.
And still one of the largest.
Correct.
In the game. You mentioned some of the former players reaching out. Just from your experiences, how long does it take a new Royal to adjust, on average, to 81 games where you better not be swinging for the fences?
Yeah. We've seen it. Players come to this ballpark, and and we've seen it, even guys coming from the minor leagues to the major leagues. So right now, the ballpark we play in AAA is very offensive. Balls go up in air, they go out. And we're constantly trying to remind our hitters, low line drives will work here. Hit your 45, 50 doubles. Hit your 35 to 40 doubles. Whatever it is, you're capable, and you will be just as productive as a hitter as the balls you hit over the fence. It's proven to be very challenging. And how long does it take? I think it just varies from guy to guy. The guys that have had the most success in this ballpark are the ones that didn't get out of their swings, that just took their doubles. We had a year we had three outfielders with 40 doubles. They didn't change their swings. It played very well. This can be a really good ballpark to hit if you stay within yourself. But we have a long history of different rosters and different players, and understand a little bit more of the psychology of what goes into hitting and how it affects our hitters. And it seems to be like there's a little bit too much of a negative effect when somebody comes here for the first time, whether it's via trade or up from the minor leagues.
I got two quick ones for JJ. It sounds like you guys have kind of had a lot of years of research and discussion about potentially moving these fences in. I'm just wondering, was there like a singular moment where you guys are like, okay, we have to move these in?
You know what? Somebody else asked me that during the course of the last week. Internal people that knew what was going on. Yeah, the one that first came to mind. I'm not saying it's the best example because there's several examples. But the ball Hosmer hit in the wild card game that the two outfielders for the A's collided. That's a homer. That's a homer. That's not a triple. That's a homer now. So that was the first one I thought about, and I know there were several others along the way that we sit there and watch our games, and we're like, that ball's gone, and it's not. It's an out. Not only is it not gone, it's an out, and that can be very frustrating. So. That's the one that, to answer your question, that's the one that comes to mind when I was first asked that last week.
And then I've heard both of you guys use the word fairness a lot of times today. Did you guys kind of feel that the old dimensions of Kauffman played unfairly?
Well, I think what it does is it creates just a very we sit on the classic dimensions of Kauffman sit on the far part of the spectrum for offense. And so you'll see park factors that tell you that doubles and triples are high. That's true. It's large. So balls are more likely to land. You're going to see those park factors go up. We wanted something that was going to probably have a little bit more balance all the way across because we think that serves our players and our and whatever future roster construction we have the best. So we aren't thinking about one of those specific batted ball outcomes more than anything else.
JJ, you mentioned a couple times, or both of you guys have mentioned this favors your hitters more than it did opposing hitters. Just wonder if you could explain why that's the case.
If I said that, I misspoke.
Well, I mean that these changes would have led to more home runs for you guys than it would have led to the other better change.
Based on our starting pitching, our current starting pitching, our roster, the type of pitchers, the type of contact they give up. When we looked at, and Daniel can reference this if he likes, when we looked at similar ballparks with our current pitching staff, the results were still very good in what would be similar to the new Kauffman dimensions. So based on our pitching, and that's going back to what I mentioned earlier, the uniqueness of the timing of having 5 years left. We have a good idea what our rotation is going to look like. Not everybody, but we have a good idea. We can do some projections over a couple of years, knowing the type of pitchers we have, and knowing that there's an expiration date on Kauffman Stadium where we may rethink this, a couple of years from now. We want the bigger ballpark, or we want a smaller, whatever it may be. But what I was trying to reference there is the group that we have right now in a small window where this stadium is still going to be in existence. We had a chance to capitalize.
You touched on what my next question was going to be, which is just the roster changes for whatever reason. Could you foresee going back?
Going back to
roster, if that no longer is the case, if it no longer favors you guys because of your current roster construction, could you see moving them back?
Going back to a bigger ballpark
Yeah.
within the time frame of this stadium being open?
Yeah.
No, this will be our ballpark for the next 5 years. Again, that's where the specificity, I can never say that word, and the details that we were trying to figure out in playing with this ballpark. I can tell you, I personally, along with others in baseball operations, enjoyed every time Daniel and Alan came back, because with every small change, there was a different outcome. So just playing with this to the point where we were going to be comfortable, so we weren't second guessing or wanting to pull the fences in. This is still going to be a very fair ballpark. It's not going to be pop-ups that go up and go out. You're going to have to hit them to get them out. So that's why we're very confident that we won't need to make any further changes.
You guys rated, I think, negatively in both corner outfield position, specifically one of them. Does that factor in at all that you guys didn't cover as much ground in the corner outfield spots last year?
Well, I think if you looked at how we constructed our roster, it was a little bit different. We had guys playing in the corner outfield. We got away from, and this speaks to the supply and demand, the difficulty of putting rosters together. We got away from something that we always tried to stay with: good defense in the corners. We tried to sacrifice a little bit of defense for offense. It didn't work out. We got beat defensively. This should help our defense a little bit. I'm not saying that we we think we're going to have 3 Gold Glovers right now. We still have to have somebody who can go out there and catch fly balls. But I think last year is a good example of some of the guys that we were putting in the outfield getting exposed a little bit because it was a bigger ballpark.
Just one more if I could, but you guys have wanted to have more power in your lineup. I assume that, I feel like I'm asking the obvious, but just assume that this is not any sort of replacement for the desires of the way you want to build your.
No. This is just watching a lot of games here and, understand the competitive nature of our team, getting feedback from players, coaches, over many years, what's best for our team and what's best, in this moment right now. Ultimately, we thought this would lead to better outcomes.
2 questions, JJ. It's just the nostalgia, the allure of having the biggest ballpark in Major League Baseball and just kind of players coming in and having an advantage. Was there kind of like a part of that discussion where you're going to be losing that?
To be candid, not really, because I think what feel like we've witnessed is when the visiting teams come in here, they know they're coming in here for 3 days and they don't think much about it, and they just take their normal swings and they'll be productive. It was more from the overall outcomes we would like to have and how could we put our players in the most favorable position physically and mentally to perform at a high and consistent level, and that's what we ended up decided on.
And the other question is that, there's obviously talk with Bobby Witt Jr. winning an MVP award. I know in all the data that you guys kind of looked through, did you look at specifically at what Bobby can do in a ballpark like this?
What I'll say, and again, if Daniel wants to comment, he was one of the players that was probably most negatively impacted by our ballpark when it comes to run production, fly ball run production. So we have reason to believe his production will go up. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we probably are going to help some of the opposite field power that he possesses. I think we'll probably improve with these changes.
Just one more, the height, right, is gonna drop from roughly 10 to 8.5 feet.
Yeah.
It would seem like that would help offense, but does it also help defense more? What is that piece? Maybe
Go ahead, Max.
Well, as you bring the fences down, there's a little bit of, as if you're bringing the fences in just a little bit too, for very specific types of batted ball arcs. It also will allow, I think, for outfielders to be able to get their glove over the fence. At 10 feet, that's pretty difficult, and it sounds like in the history of Kauffman Stadium at one point it might have been 13, which would have meant that never happened unless you were a superhero. So,
I mean, you guys have been here a long time watching games. Try to think of how many robbed home runs you've seen over your time here. It's not many. I'm sure there's been some, but now we have an opportunity to see that, which is part of the excitement of this. Our fans, it's an exciting play to see when home runs are robbed.
I think that's it, questions, so, thanks again for your time, and again, plenty of time for the images if you want. Cole's gonna walk around with us, and see more closer look at it, ask me questions about the new CEO or meeting. If you wanna do that, let's just meet up on 2, just go up 1 floor, and then we'll walk right to the room.
go out there.
Nothing tagged to that level of accuracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when they got, it was weird too. It was a center field.
Yeah.
The Alice and came around.
I sat down with Kurt Nelson like in the middle of the year because I wanted to learn more about the history. I'm obviously not native to Kansas City, so it was interesting to hear that they had done that and they'd gone back and
It's a big switch because that's when they put the